This happened to me in the fall of 1998, in a state forest so far off the map that even the county didn't send a plow truck out there in winter. I was 22, finishing up a geology degree, and I needed 3 days of field work on an old ridge of exposed limestone for my senior thesis. My advisor called it a nothing assignment. Walk in, take samples, walk out. I believed him. I drove up in my Chevy pickup on a Thursday morning, gear in the bed, cassette player on the seat next to me, a Steve Earle tape halfway through side 2. The ranger station was a single wide trailer with a hand-painted sign. The ranger who checked me in was maybe 60, with a face like old rope. He looked at my permit for a long time before he signed it. "You camping alone?" he asked. I said I was. He nodded slowly, like that answer disappointed him. "Stay on the marked trail after dark. Don't go wandering past the old logging cut on the east side. And if you hear anybody on a radio out there, don't answer back." I laughed a little. I thought he was messing with the new kid. He didn't laugh with me. "I mean it," he said. "Just don't answer." I didn't think much of it. Rangers say strange things. I signed the register, noted my planned route on the paper trail map they gave me, and drove another 40 minutes down a gravel logging road to the trailhead. There was only one other vehicle in the little dirt lot, an old brown Bronco, dusty, parked at an angle like whoever left it had been in a hurry. I didn't think about that either. Not yet. There was a little bulletin board nailed up near the trailhead sign, the kind every campground had back then, covered in thumbtacked flyers gone soft and gray from rain. Most of it was the usual stuff: a lost dog, a church potluck, but somebody had tacked up a plain index card, no name on it, that just said, "If you camp past the second creek, keep your radio off at night." I remember reading it twice, the way you read something that doesn't quite make sense, and then folding it into the back of my head with everything else that seemed like a joke. The hike in was easy. 2.5 miles on a marked trail, then off onto an old survey path toward the limestone ridge. I found a flat spot near a creek to set up my tent by early afternoon, took my rock samples, and shot half a roll of film on my dad's old 35mm camera. Ordinary work, ordinary day. The first strange thing happened around 4 in the afternoon. I was coming back from the ridge when I passed a hiker heading the other way, fast, almost jogging. He had a full pack on, like he'd only just made camp and then unmade it. He didn't say hello. He just looked at me, then looked past me into the trees, like he was checking if I was alone. "Heading out already?" I asked. "Yeah," he said. "You should too." I asked him why. He didn't answer. He just kept walking, faster than before. I told myself he was probably out of food or scared of the weather. There were clouds building over the ridge. That was easier to believe. By 6, I had my camp set. Small fire, tent up, food bag hung from a branch the way you're supposed to. I sat by the fire, eating a can of stew and listening to the woods get dark. That's when I noticed the footprints. They were maybe 15 feet from my tent, at the edge of the tree line, half hidden in the leaves. Boot prints, fresh, the mud still dark and wet inside them. Facing my camp. There was no trail there. No reason for anyone to be standing in that exact spot, looking at where I'd pitched my tent, unless they wanted to look at where I'd pitched my tent. I told myself it was the ranger. Maybe he'd walked through earlier to check on me. I almost believed it. Almost. I didn't sleep well that first night. Around midnight, I heard 2 whistles, far off, one long and one short. An owl, maybe. I'd heard stranger sounds in the woods. I wrote it off. In the morning, my food bag was different. Not gone. Different. I always tie the same knot, a habit from scouts, and I always hang it the same way, rope wrapped twice around the branch. That morning, the rope was wrapped 3 times, and the knot was wrong. Somebody had taken it down and put it back up, and they didn't know my knot. I stood there a long time looking at that rope. I almost packed up right then. But I had 2 more days of samples to collect, and I told myself, the way you do when you don't want to admit you're scared, that raccoons untie things sometimes. That wind does strange things to knots. None of that was true, and some part of me knew it. I hiked out to the ridge again that second day, and on my way back I passed the old trail register box bolted to a tree at the junction. Hikers write their names and dates in a little notebook inside. I flipped through it out of boredom while I ate lunch. The last entry before mine was from 6 days earlier. It just said, "Heard the men on the radio again. Left early. Don't camp past mile 2. No name, no signature." I sat there with a sandwich half-eaten in my hand, reading that line over and over. The men on the radio. I thought about the ranger's warning. I thought about the hiker practically running out that afternoon. I had a little battery radio in my pack, a cheap portable, the kind that picks up AM, FM, and the weather band. Nothing special. I only brought it in case a storm rolled through. I hadn't turned it on yet. I turned it on that night, mostly static. I scanned through the weather band, got the automated forecast voice, turned the dial past a country station bleeding in from somewhere down in the valley. Then, right at the edge of the band, in a gap where there shouldn't have been anything at all, I got 2 voices, clear as a phone call. "Still by the creek, fire's lit. Copy. He get water yet?" "Not yet. Tent's the green one, west side of the flat." My stomach dropped straight through the ground. My tent was green. I was camped on the west side of the flat by the creek. My fire was lit right at that moment, right in front of me. I sat frozen, the radio in my lap, listening to 2 men describe my campsite like they were reading it off a checklist. I didn't answer back. I remembered what the ranger said, and for the first time I understood why he'd said it. I turned the radio off, and I sat there in the dark, listening to my own fire crackle, feeling like the woods had eyes I couldn't see. I didn't sleep at all that night. Around 2 in the morning, I saw a flashlight beam far off across the creek, moving low and slow along the tree line. It went dark all at once, like someone had switched it off on purpose the second they realized how far the light was carrying. A few minutes later, a second beam answered it, further up the ridge, blinking twice before it went dark too, like the 2 of them were checking in with each other. Somewhere close to my tent, a rock shifted under weight that wasn't mine. I sat still until the sun came up, listening to every sound the dark had to offer and not moving for a single one of them. In the morning, I broke camp fast. I still had 1 more set of samples to collect on a smaller outcrop about a half-mile from where I'd been. I told myself I'd get in, get out, and be back at my truck by early afternoon. That's when I found the notebook. It was sitting in the fork of a tree, about chest height, tucked out of the rain under a shelf of bark. A cheap spiral notebook, waterlogged at the edges. Inside were pages of small, careful handwriting, dates, times, and what looked like a rough hand-drawn map of the trail system. Certain spots were circled. My creek was one of them. So was the flat where I'd camped the first night. Next to some of the circles were initials, not names, just letters and short notes. 3 nights. Solo. Left early. 2 nights. Didn't hear anything. Moved him along anyway. 1 night. Family group, no action. I counted the entries. There were 11 of them, going back further than I wanted to think about. The ink changing color and the handwriting drifting slightly from page to page, like more than one person had been keeping the same book over the years. I didn't understand what moved him along meant, and I didn't want to. At the base of the tree, half buried in wet leaves, I found a handful of dead AA batteries, the casings crusted white the way they get after months out in the weather. Somebody had been coming back to this exact spot for a long time, swapping batteries in whatever they were using to listen, and never once bothered to carry the old ones out. I put the notebook back exactly where I found it. I don't know why. I think some part of me was afraid that taking it would tell somebody I'd been there. I skipped the last outcrop. I started walking straight for the trailhead, faster than I should have on uneven ground, my pack banging against my back. About a mile out, I heard the whistle again. 1 long, 1 short. Closer this time. I didn't run. I made myself walk, steady, watching the tree line on both sides. I passed the spot where I'd seen the first hiker the day before, and for one long stretch of trail, I swear I could feel someone pacing me on the other side of the ridge, matching my speed through the brush, though I never once saw a person. When I finally broke out of the trees into the dirt lot, the brown Bronco was gone. My truck was still there, exactly where I'd left it. I threw my pack in the bed and drove straight back to the ranger station without stopping. The same ranger was still on shift. I told him everything: the radio, the footprints, the notebook, the whistle. He didn't look surprised. He looked tired, the way people look when they've heard the same story more than once and have run out of ways to explain it away. "There's an old hunting camp back in there," he said finally. "Been there longer than the state forest has. Private club, technically still legal land, sits right in the middle of our boundary. We get calls like yours every couple of years. Nobody's ever been hurt, that we know of." I asked him what "moved him along" meant. I don't think he knew I'd read the notebook. He just looked at me for a second too long and said he didn't know what I was talking about. I asked if I could file a report. He said I could, but it wouldn't change anything, because there was no proof of anyone doing anything wrong. Standing near your own land isn't a crime. Listening to a radio isn't a crime. Watching somebody for 3 days apparently isn't a crime either. I never got my film developed until I got home 2 weeks later. Out of the whole roll, 4 frames were missing, not blank. Missing, like the film had been wound past them and then wound back. I never figured out which 4. The state forest closed that whole section to overnight camping 2 years later. No official reason was ever posted, just a small sign at the trailhead that says day use only past the second creek crossing. I drove up there once, years after, just to look at it. The sign is still standing. Nobody I asked in town would tell me why it went up. I still don't know how many of them there were that weekend, or how long they'd been watching me before I ever noticed the footprints. I don't know what would have happened if I'd stayed a 4th night, or if I'd answered back on that radio instead of turning it off. Sometimes, on nights when I can't sleep, I think about that notebook sitting in the fork of that tree, and I wonder whose initials are written next to mine.